My name is Reema Khurana. I have been associated with IMT Ghaziabad for 25 years now. Prior to this, I was associated with corporate higher education design and delivery for 5 years. So 30 years of education and delivery in information systems domain is what I've been working on. Today, I'm going to be discussing the topic, the storyteller's story. Prepare, tell, engage, and repeat. What is a storyteller? And why are we discussing a storyteller at the moment? So storyteller is a person, of course, who tells the stories. And I'm sure all of you remember the stories that were told to you when you were growing up. All of you get impressed by the stories they tell in the movies, the stories they talk about in the ad jingles. So your classes have to be those stories which grow on the students and they imbibe from the stories. Of course, the storyteller has to weave a story around the context. So what I have been practicing for last so many years, and I've evolved the practices, I treat myself as a storyteller in the class and not as a faculty. Of course, being a storyteller is a difficult ask because a storyteller needs to prepare. Preparation is a very, very important aspect of telling a story. So how I prepare my subjects is essentially I go through a 4-tier preparation stage. The first year happens say about 6 months to 8 months before the course is about to start, wherein there's a course outline preparation which happens, which is a macro level decision of the contents which will be delivered in the 20-session course. Subsequent to this, 10 days before the course actually starts, I tend to get down to each session and talk about what story will go into each session. So everywhere the story comes in forms of a video, in the form of a case study, in the form of a news clipping or the current news, and I weave the story around that particular happening or that particular object in that class. The third tier of preparation comes a day, maybe 2 days before the class, wherein each 90 minutes of the session are planned. So each minute of the 90-minute session is planned. The devil lies in the detail. So detailing is so important, and the detailing involves exactly how you will engage the students. We talk more about engagement as we go on. The fourth level of preparation talks about the fact that if you're not able to finish the content in the 90-minute session, you tend to spill over the content, so you have to plan for the next session. Sometimes the content is less for 75 minutes. So what happens in those 75 minutes, additional 15 minutes, how do you plug in those 15 minutes, right? So that is the last minute preparation that one needs to do. After preparation, we go on to the actual tell, how to tell the story. So telling the story is actually a form of engaging the students. Before you tell the story, again, you need to understand the student profiles, who they are, where they are coming from, what are their expectations from the class. Suppose there's a history honors graduate in your class of information systems or marketing or accounts. It is important to understand from the perspective of the history honors graduate, what does he expect or she expect from your delivery, and then obviously to alter the delivery to meet the needs of that particular student. You need to engage with the students to understand their requirements. The engagement could be an online activity, could be an offline activity. Last few years, we've seen online classes. So in order to engage in an online class, you need to actually enter into the class about 5 to 7 minutes before the students come. Similarly, in the offline class also, you need to enter into the class 5 to 7 minutes before the students come. You need to speak to them, understand where they're coming from, how their day has been, and then you start delivering the story. Your objectives should be clearly defined in your mind, but you need to integrate the objectives with the story. You have to weave your way through the story to reach the objective. You have to apprise the students of the objectives on the way. You need not throw the slide of the objectives to the students at the beginning of the session. It has to happen gradually as the session progresses. People use PowerPoint, but I have always remembered a statement issued by one of my colleagues, death by PowerPoint. So you should be very, very cautious that you're not using too much of PowerPoint in the class. You should be natural and confident in your tell part. You can use tools other than PowerPoint. You can use tools like data from some websites, or you can get a person from the industry to talk to the students about that particular objective. You can do a group exercise. In the 90 minutes activity, you can allow students to use their own tools in the classroom. They can have a laptop, an iPad, or a phone, and Google out a particular topic. Give them a 1-minute pitch to share their findings. You have to give space to people to be able to accept and reciprocate the findings from the story that you're telling. It is important to give space to the students to be able to share their learning as well. While telling, we also need to engage the students. So as I've been saying, you need to understand the type of the student. You need to understand whether the student is an extrovert, introvert, what are their backgrounds, as I said earlier. Now, how do you identify the type of the student? How do you know whether he's an introvert or an extrovert? So obviously you need to engage with the student in a very, very different way. You need to give them time before and after the class. You need to follow up on the discussions. You need to chit chat. You need to throw jokes in the class, but please be cautious that the jokes should not hurt anybody's sentiments. So the jokes should also be planned and prepared before they're actually delivered. You need to have an inclusive environment in the class. You need to speak to the last person in the right-hand corner, the person in the middle, the person in the front. Everybody has to come out with the answers or lack of them. But be very, very cautious that you do not end up criticizing any of the students. You have to continue to appreciate their personalities, their contributions, and then slowly the trust will develop between the student and the faculty, which is very, very important to be able to internalize the concept, for them to remember the story. You have to be a good listener. You cannot only keep talking in the class. You have to create breakout groups in an online medium so that they're able to engage with each other. You have to flow into the class, into the objective. You have to flow out of the objective, out of the class. You cannot throw topics at the students. You have to keep flowing in and flowing out of the stories. You need to integrate the stories right from first session to the next session to the next session, and then build the whole story. Also, remember, you have to be patient. You have to wrap up each class after the session is over, or just before the session is over. In wrapping up, you can ask the students to summarize. You can give them a small writing assignment. But remember, if you give them a writing assignment at the end of the class, you have to actually correct that and give them a feedback. So in the last topic for the day, we come to the repeat. So you've prepared the story, you have told the story, you have engaged the students. Now we talk about repeat. You will repeat the story in the subsequent session. So after one session, you need to sit down, you need to introspect, you need to understand the kind of vibes which come from the class. Maybe there was a question asked by a student, maybe you've parked that particular question. Please ensure you go back to that parked question and you answer that question. I hope you remember the names of the students also, because that will further aid the trust development between the faculty and the student and help them to internalize the concept through the story. If there is a midterm feedback, and I hope you insist on a midterm feedback, please take the feedback very, very seriously, because you have to develop on the pointers given to you by students. Please go back to them, discuss the midterm feedback, ask them if there's something more that they wish to learn in the class. Help them with their case study competitions, help them with their assignments, help them with their summer internship projects, with their short-term projects. See how you can reach out to the students through various media and channels to assist them in internalizing the concept into their careers. However, please remember, you should not trip onto their personal space. They are individuals. You have to respect their personal space. We have to be professional, we have to be subject oriented, and we have to help the student in taking the subject ahead in their careers.